Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast, brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter at SWGM Podcast. Like and subscribe on YouTube, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Subscribe on iTunes at Savage Worlds GM Podcast. Hey, while you're at it, go ahead on to Patreon. Throw us a buck at patreon.com SWGM Podcast. If you're watching the live stream tonight, we'll be doing Q&As. So participate in the chat. Bring us all your questions.
Wow, I gotta say that was
a good job.
A great intro.
That was a good job.
It's almost like you've done this before.
Now you just need to introduce everybody.
Yes, of course. On the panel tonight, we have El Pape, or Savage Daddy, Jared Gunning. We have the Maven, David Scott. We have Savage Mommy, Chris Fulch. And, of course, I am your intern, Dustin Smith.
So close, Dustin. So
close, yet so far away.
All right.
El
That's all right.
was a bit much for me.
Yeah, the introduction was good, and then it just kind of went downhill quick.
Right.
So I'm a little under the weather. Voice going in and out, so I may be participating randomly throughout the show. Maybe not. Like I said, voice keeps going in and out. But tonight's topic, just general Q&A from the audience or anything the hosts want to talk about. So I'll just leave it to you guys, and I will jump in when I can. Go ahead.
So it sounds like you're a 3-pack-a-dayer tonight, Jared.
It's called flu.
Oh, yeah, you get to be one of the, 30 million who get to catch the flu. Lucky you.
Goddamn birds and pigs.
I'll tell you this much, Ethel. Back in my day, Milton Berle was king of the stage. All right. So we got questions tonight, right?
Yeah, they probably already came in.
Chat yet, so
Someone, quick, ask a question. Hurry.
well, I'll throw one out to the panel at large while we're waiting for the audience to start supplying them.
No, Dave.
We've
The
all
shaken rules are fine the way they are. All right, we don't need to talk about that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
we've all seen Savage World of Flash Gordon. I know we've all at least had a chance to peruse the book. What is the feeling about this? What did they call it? The combat encounter table or whatever, the one that happens off of tricks and
creative combat.
The creative combat table. The idea of a roll on a table every time a raise comes up on specific tasks.
You don't have to. That's an option. You'll see right on there that if you want to just take their shaken or whatever the consequences is for the raise, and you really don't want to go onto the chart, don't. Again, it's your game, it's your choice. If you don't like going to charts, don't go to charts. The chart's there to add a little bit of spice, a little bit of flavor, maybe a little bit of fun that you might not have if you don't add the chart. I hear that there might be a chart similar to that. Or maybe more than one in a certain new edition that might be coming out. I don't know 100% if that's the case. But again, your game, your choice. I mean, if I'm mistaken, then people can correct me. But I really think that it actually even says something about if you don't want to go to the chart, don't go to the chart.
I don't know. I think it adds something a little bit fun. Like, we all get to that weird point where we like to roll on tables, but I feel like if you're in a flow and it's sort of running with it, then maybe you don't turn to it. Maybe instead of going on the creative combat, you just sort of like roll with the flow. But if you're stagnant and you just run out of ideas, then yeah, the creative combat table seems like it's a good idea. Everything seems like it's a good idea at the time.
I guess I'm just concerned because I know there's a big pushback in, I'll just say, the modern version of the hobby to extra tables. And I think there's too many people who have those horror stories from playing games like Rollmaster or the old they've now renamed it Phase Rip, but the old Marvel system where everything was a roll against a table. And I think there's some pushback from modern gamers against tables, and it's like Savage Worlds is really ultra light on tables, and this one seems like it wouldn't be too big of a thing to add, and I definitely see all the stuff it can add. I'm just there's something about adding a table mid-combat that seems odd.
Yeah, I don't know, though. People want to say that they want to point to Rollmaster. That's a whole different animal. That's not even close to Savage Worlds and the tables. That's a whole different animal. We played Rollmaster for a while, and we really liked it. One of my favorite characters of all time was a Rollmaster character. But at this point in my life, I don't want to have to go to 25 different charts and spend 7 hours creating a character. That's why I like Savage Worlds. We just created characters last week for a Swedish RPG called Trudvang. And it took us a little over 3 hours, and that was just killing me. So I'm like, I want to just be done with this character and get ready and move on and play the game. And it was just like, oh my God, it just seemed like a drug on. It wasn't intuitive to me, but that's me. I've said this before, coming from, I think I look at everything through Savage Worlds glasses now, which can be a bad thing.
I definitely subscribe to the Ron Blessingism from way back early podcast days, where he said he finds himself sitting down to play a new game and within moments going, I could run this better in Savage Worlds. Yep.
Well, I want to answer that Billy Bad Ace, his first question. What do you guys think of Savage Rifts? Any advice for me? My buddy wants me to run a game for him. I'll tell you, I was all stoked. I was all excited about it. I ran it for 2 separate groups. The one group, kind of with my job loss and all the crap that happened to me end of last year, kind of went away. The other group, I'm still playing for them, and we went back to Deadlands because they know I love Deadlands. One of the players was saying to me, he's like, I could tell when you were running Rifts, it just wasn't, you weren't into it. It wasn't what you wanted to be doing. He says, I see when you run Deadlands, you get into it. You can tell you have like the spark in your eye and you want to run it. So to me, it was very superhero-y, and I don't like trying to run superhero games. It was which it's supposed to be. It's dialed up to 11. It's over the top. It's all kinds of power and things like that. But to me, it was a little too overpowered, and I fell back to Deadlands, which is what I like to run, and I'm much happier there. I would say, advice-wise, just do know that power level, even at novice, is ramped up way more than it would be in a normal Savage Worlds game of anything else. So prepare for that. Prepare for them to just walk through your bad guys, which is okay. That's not a horrible thing. You just put a ton of Skelebots and coalition guys and let them just tromp through them. And if they have a good time doing that, then so be it. But, just read through the books and just be prepared, and be prepared for constantly being asked, is there a ley line around? How far away is it? Is there a rift around? And it doesn't really, you can put ley lines wherever you want, but I kind of found that kind of a pain in the ass as well. Is all right, well, is there a ley line around here? Okay, where's it at? How far away is it? How long is it? Take notes on stuff like that. If you're going to do that, if you're going to put a ley line somewhere, make a note of it, because they're going to want to use it. They may come back to it. So that's just, that's a few of my things with Rifts.
Playing off of what you said, Chris, I've run a campaign of Savage Rifts, and I've also run adventures at Mysticon, my local cons, and I agree completely. I think, if you're going to play it, it is definitely a 4-color supers game, if not a heavy hitters super game. And
I would say heavy hitters.
Yeah, it's over the top. I was running at Mysticon, and the some of my players are like, wait, I can do that in this setting? Yes, you can do that in this setting. Like, so I can do this in this setting. Yes, you can do that in this setting. And they were just continually shocked as to the power level. So I would say, and this is kind of bleeds into Lindsey Johnson. Hello, cute. I would say that you have to adopt the whole cinematic aspect of it. It doesn't matter if they beat your bad guys down as long as you really have fun characters. The things that add to the cinematic feel is less bean counting. And, with Rifts, I think going to the ley lines is where a lot of that bean counting comes in. But it just goes right out the window because you're like, I have 40 power points on a Rift? Yes. You do become Stompy McStomperson in that game.
I'd like to take a look real quick at the Billy Bad about flight. How does flight work? Flight is aerial pace. And climb is the abstract measure of maneuverability.
Yeah. The climb attribute basically becomes the modifier in a chase scenario when you're using the chase rules specifically. Other than that, there's really no place in Savage Worlds that it uses it. Apart from maybe a modifier to a grappling check midair between two different combatants with a different climb. But even that seems like that might be stretching to apply a modifier where it's not really called for. And the climb 0 actually means that they have perfect flight. They can climb up and down at no penalty, whereas like a higher climb actually works as a penalty to that, I believe, unless I've got that backwards. But then
it's backwards.
Here's the thing. It so rarely comes up. No freaking clue.
Yeah, I don't use things that fly a lot because I'm with that person. I don't really, half the time I don't understand how the flight stuff works. I'm like,
here's a good example, right?
No flying monsters.
So let's say a TIE fighter has a top speed and acceleration or pace. Well, that's really for flight's really a monstrous ability. Let's say a dragon has a 24-inch flight pace. He may only have a 12-inch for climb. It just means that he's fairly maneuverable in the air. Could go up, down, swoop, barrel roll, do what he needs to do. It's completely 100% abstracted. It just gives you, like Dave said, like a +2 in chases if you have a high maneuverability.
Whew. So Lindsey Johnson had asked, and I know Dustin had started to touch on this one a little bit, what supports the cinematic rule of cool. Really good roleplay GMs and players do that in every system. This isn't Savage Worlds specific, but the rule of cool really comes off better when it's, and I grab the tablecloth, pull it out from underneath all the dishes and throw it in his face and then kick him. That florid description rather than I attack after an agility trick. Yeah, agility tricks are great. Tests of wills are great. But have it be more than I intimidate, I attack. That florid description will really tie in the cinematic, and you'll actually find your players will start taking actions that there are no mechanics for in the game, that you as a GM then have to kind of shoot from the hip to arbitrate how it's going to end up being handled because you've given them these florid descriptions and these amazing cinematic moments. They'll start to think of this crazy random thing they saw in a movie once where a character did, a backflip with a toaster oven that they tied around a lamppost and then hung somebody with. And then you've got to figure out how that works as a combat maneuver.
In a lot of ways, if I get caught in one of those situations where I have to make something up on the fly, I'll either treat it as a dramatic task or I'll treat it as a social conflict. And social conflicts can be cooked in several different ways if you get down to it. But yeah, it is really just creating a character with a distinct motivation and voice and just sort of like playing it from there. And I think Savage Worlds, is got enough in the way of rules that you can come up with a rule or a method to achieve the goal, but it's skinny enough in the rules, like it's rules light enough that people aren't going through like 3 or 4 different books to try and come up with a reason why this is how it's going to happen, you know?
So, Sunset Sam, kind of the last question we had in the list that we haven't got to yet, had touched on the idea of, do we wish there was something between a dramatic task and a social conflict to give players more ability to use their skills? No, I don't. I think dramatic task, social conflict, and the chase rules and mass battles are 4 really nice subsets of rules within Savage Worlds that let me go, oh, this is a great opportunity where I can use the social conflict for a wrestling match in the middle of the arena, and every time they do a trick or something, they win a certain number of tokens. Instead of actually running a combat, I can run this as a social conflict, but let them use their combat skills. Or, you know, I can run a dogfight as a mass combat to see how many, you know, how much armor has been stripped off of your fighter before you're going to go down, kind of a thing, you know. And you have that whole morale issue where, okay, you've lost partial control, you have no choice but to pull out and fly away. Mass battle makes perfect sense in that situation.
Yeah, we did something sort of similar to that, but we kind of took a dramatic task and a chase and kind of morphed them together for Buccaneer. Just basically called it a chaos situation where you're going to have to use a lot of different attributes and traits, but you have so many rounds that this is going to last. So it's a dramatic task because you have so many rounds, but then it's a chase because things are happening during that dramatic task that are forcing you. You might be, you know, you might be chased by lava. It might be that you're chased by the natives, whatever it is. And it's kind of a something that the GM can kind of set up a little bit ahead of time. I mean, you can do it on the fly, but you can also set it up ahead of time. And if you kind of know where you want to put it, it's good for con games. So that's, you know, that's something very, very similar that we do in that. So if you want to get your hands on Buccaneer once we get everything taken care of and get it up on RPG Now, feel free.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw this out there. I've seen a lot of questions in chat about the Wild Wild West game and the chase rules. Those are never going to see the light of day. They've been shot down by Peg in a pitch I sent to them nigh on 3 or 4 years ago now. I came to Loggerheads. They didn't feel like it really fit with Savage Worlds. So that set of rules is something that belongs wholeheartedly to me and will never see the light of day. So no, I'm not going to explain them to you. I'm not going to tell you how well they would work in somebody else's game or anything like that. It is something that we have run a few times in our personal games. And even I look at them and go, they need more polish before I'm willing to use them in every game. So it's not really something that's out there for public, you know. Enjoy the Wild Wild West game. We do use them once or twice throughout the series. But yeah, it's not something I'm going to tell you how to use in your game and how well it would fit, because it's not really there for public consumption. But I think that fits here too, because to take that as inspiration too, if you have a situation in your game that just doesn't fit the normal rules, create some new ones for yourself. Savage Worlds setting rules are all about Chris and company's chaos situation from Buccaneer, or the specialty chase rules that I had written up. Those types of mechanics are born out of, hey, I want to do something interesting in the game. What kind of rules do I need around that to make that happen? Rather than, I feel like Savage Worlds doesn't have enough rules, I need to create something. Pick something in your game you want to facilitate and build a set of rules around it, rather than trying to build a set of rules because you feel like there's something missing.
I wanna like, going off of that, Dave, I kind of want to throw out a challenge to some of our GMs to try this. Take a mass battle and try to run it like a heist. Try and run a heist game using mass battle and see how you will start coming up with ways to sort of tweak it as you're going.
Okay, so I'm just looking back over the list here. I think
Ruben wanted to know about a GM horror story. I mean, I could tell him mine real quick.
Go right ahead.
So I think I might have told this before, but I'll tell it again because it's one of the ones that was kind of very horror story. So it was my first time trying to use Roll20, and I got some friends together, and my one buddy says, I have a friend who wants to come play. I'm like, all right, I guess he can come play. And the dude's name was Weasel. I guess I should have known from the get-go with a dude named Weasel that we were going to have problems. So we start the game. I'm using the Tomb of Terrors, just the Savage Worlds free fantasy game that has the maps and the player characters already all created. So we start running it, and he's playing the character who has the mean hindrance. And his mean hindrance meant I'm an asshole. And I'm an asshole to all the other characters, but I'm also an asshole as a player, not just a PC. And so the game was not going that well. He was getting drunk as we were playing. And so I go to whisper to one of the other people. I'm like, sorry, I put in there, sorry, I didn't know this guy was going to be such an ass. Well, I didn't do it right. So it went to everyone. And everybody saw it. And my one friend kind of whispers back. He says, do you know you just said that to everyone? And at that point, I was like, yeah, I did, but I don't really care. So we're just going to go ahead and either try to keep playing or stop. And everybody got really quiet, and it kind of killed the game. But he was an asshole, and he was playing the mean hindrance so he could be an asshole. And yeah, it didn't go well.
Well, I mean, there's the typical GM horror story that I know, like Chris has one and I have one that are almost identical in that we let someone play something in a game and immediately regretted it.
Oh, yeah.
So you have those, and I know we've both told those stories. So the people who've been watching for a while know, mine is the Japanese samurai girl in East Texas, and his is an assassin in Deadlands Noir. But I think if I had to go with like true GM horror stories, I have to go with stuff where I GM'd and wasn't in the right frame of mind, or I GM'd without doing the appropriate research. And the two I have for the not in the right frame of mind is I GM'd for someone who used to be a fan of the show. They had joined one of Jared's games and then had shifted over and was playing in one of my games. And he pulled some bombastic maneuver where he jumps up and stabs his sword down through a demon's tail. And I had rolled absolutely. You do that, it does this much damage, and the demon is now pinned. We move forward like a round and a half. And it comes to his turn, and he goes, well, and I slash the demon. And I said, well, if you do that, you've got to pull the sword free, and he's going to be able to move. And he goes, well, no, I never stuck it through his tail and pinned him. I just stabbed his tail. I never meant to pin him in place. And I'm like, okay, well, unfortunately, that can't happen because I'm not rolling back combat a round and a half to reset what's happened. You should have spoke up before now. But I was having an issue that, the people who are close to me know I have mental health issues. So I said it in a very angry tone to him. And unfortunately, I ended up losing a friend in that game, and we ended up losing a fan of the show who had played with us, I don't even know, probably 6 months or more at that point, was a regular in all of our Friday night games, and was now joining in on like the Tuesday night games that I was running. So I ended up losing a friend because I didn't make that conscious decision not to sit down at the table as the GM in the wrong frame of mind. And that's not just because of mental health, but I mean, that's anything. If I'm a player, I can be pissed off, sit down and play the game and be just fine. But when you're the GM, you've got to juggle the whole world. Sitting down in the wrong frame of mind is a quick route to either forgetting a rule, running an NPC wrong. There's going to be something you're screwing up because you're just not thinking clearly as a GM. Those are great nights to say, guys, this isn't going to happen right. Let's play a board game. Let's play cards. Let's pop in a movie and just have a chill night, because you as the GM have to be on point to run the game. Don't try to run the game when you're not, or it probably won't be as bad as mine where you end up losing a friend over it. But I mean, it absolutely could be. From the other side of that, the other horror story I will tell is years ago, very first time I was GMing for a group of guys in D&D, and they all said they wanted to play Ravenloft, so I didn't bother to look anything up. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll throw them up against, oh, look, here, this has a moderate number of hit points. It's low level, a baby werewolf. And it destroyed the party in a matter of about 4 rounds because they couldn't do anything to it. Because they're low-level characters in Ravenloft and can't do anything yet. They don't have specialty magic weapons or silvered weapons or anything to handle a werewolf. And I hadn't done any research and just threw something together. And that's one of those points where, at least with Savage Worlds, you don't have as many rules to know. You don't have a monster manual that's 3 inches thick with all these different, things. Plus, quite honestly, you can just ignore this rule. But that was my first time running something, and I didn't have that experience. So be aware, especially early on. If you're not familiar, make sure you take the time to put in that study and know the stuff before you sit down as a GM, because that was not a fun game for anyone involved. It wasn't fun for me because all my players are looking at me upset. And it wasn't fun for them because they felt like I had ambushed them, that I just didn't want them to be able to survive and put them in one of those true antagonistic GM, I'm going to kill the whole party moments. So it's just a horrible thing all the way around.
I'm going to try here for one. One of my favorites is the players who tell you they want something, or they completely understand something, and you double check your communication with them 5, 6, 7 times. For example, and Dave can expound on this, we want to play in a fantasy world with no magic. Number 1. Number 2, you're playing in a zombie apocalypse. This is Die Hard in the zombie apocalypse, and a character wanted to pick up a newsstand, rip it out of the ground, and bash zombies with it. And couldn't understand why I kept telling them, no, you can't do that. Like, well, why can't I just reach over and rip out the newsstand? Dude, it's bolted into concrete. Well, yeah, I'll just make a strict roll. No, you won't. And then characters feel like, I don't want any magic in this game. Alchemy, maybe. And then asking for a spell list.
So, keep scrolling here as we get new questions. Real estate, Chiriqui Bienes Racis. I've got no clue. I've butchered the name. I've pulled a Savage Daddy.
I was just not going to say the name. I was just going to go, I'll just read the question. I'm not saying the name.
So they want to know, can Savage Worlds run a true Battletech-esque mech giant robot war game? Or is Crunch Fest too far for Savage Worlds?
And if you're not watching and you're listening to this as a podcast, we're all shaking our heads. Yes, it can be done.
Yep.
Use this
in more than one way.
Right. Use the Sci-Fi Companion. There's rules for it in the core book. We did it as a podcast. We came up with our mech game using basically a 5-man band as player characters. So yeah, no, it can definitely be done. I mean, I don't have a lot more to say about it, but yes, it can be done.
That was a Sentai game or a Seti Sentai game. I'm butchering it horribly, but that was actually like where the robots combine. In Battletech, really, man, if you think about it, a mech suit is just a piece of armor that's way bigger.
Yeah, it's power, big huge ass power armor.
So when one of my first blog posts was actually kaijus versus mech, and what you got to realize is that it's relative. Like if you read the rules for size, it's relative. A kaiju that is 5 plus 5 size and a robot armor that is plus 5 size, they even out. They don't get any pluses or negatives. Regular people are going to be able to hit them no problem because they're smaller. Dave, you're probably much more the expert on this, but whenever I handled just the basic concept of giant monsters versus people in robot suits, I was like, whatever the size is, like if it's 10, you just add a 0. Like people that are so small are insects. How would a swarm fight? So that was how I handled it when I was working on it. But like Chris said, like the sci-fi companion has actual stats if you want to go that route.
So I'm not going to take the time to walk into the next room and bring back my $250 Battletech jacket and hat. What I will say is I'm kind of a big ass fan, and I have a giant tube here filled with posters that are blueprints like the one behind me on the wall for the Mad Cat, the Warhammer, and the Battle Master that I'm sending to Jib. I've got obviously a bunch of collectibles behind me. I've got a box of the original pewter and plastic minis from the different box sets. I've got all the rules, honestly within arm's reach, but I'm not going to reach down there and pull them all out of the desk because it's a giant freaking stack. I've also got them all in PDF. So, am I familiar with Battletech? Abso-fucking-lutely. Can you run Battletech in Savage Worlds? Yes, and at the same time, no. You can run the Battletech universe in Savage Worlds, and you can do a much better job of it than you can trying to run the old Battletech and MechWarrior side by side together. It was a clunky, horrible, conflict of like one used one dice mechanic, the other used a different dice mechanic, and you had to convert the MechWarriors back and forth every time they got to level up. It was insane. Doesn't work very well. So Savage Worlds is going to do that all as one smooth thing. The Sci-Fi Companion does indeed have, I believe they call them walkers, which are, they suffer the same thing all of the companions, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say all, that the Sci-Fi Companion and the Superpowers 2.0 Companion suffer, which is a little bit of math inflation. Things are cooler because they do more damage. Things are cooler because they use more dice. But they work perfectly fine. With that said, I know I have done, just as a kind of a personal challenge to myself, a full like Battletech setting, and we played it for a couple of months with some friends of ours, and I had two people who were very Savage World savvy, and I had one person other than myself who was extremely Battletech savvy and could tell you the hit locations on a 2d6 roll every time by tapping on his body through the numbers. So they gave me kind of a read on it. The Savage Worlds players felt like they were just playing Savage Worlds. They didn't even notice the specialty rules I had put in place to emulate Battletech. To them, it just felt like yet another Savage Worlds game with a few setting rules. The Battletech players said the biggest difference was the combats played like the books and the movies and the video game cutscenes, where they hit you with a laser and something falls the fuck off. But in all reality, it's Savage Worlds. They can core you out with a headshot, shot one, just like they could in the old school Battletech. But what they're not going to do is take 3 hours to whittle you down with machine gun fire 2 points at a time on a 45 armor center torso if you've got, say, an Atlas. With that said, a lot of people asked me about heat. How do you handle heat? The easy answer for me was, okay, instead of worrying about heat, apply multi-action penalties if they want to fire multiple weapons. Oh, you want to fire your LRM and your AC-20 and your SRM-6? You're at -6 to hit because you're firing 3 separate weapon systems. And then I put in the targeting computer, which allowed you to link weapons together to a single circuit. And then I put, if you do that, that weapon system doesn't come back online within the targeting computer for a full round. So if you decided to fire all 8 lasers at once, Sure, you could do an alpha strike with a Nova Cat, but the following round you had no weapons that were up to be used because it took that long for the computer to recycle. A couple of simple rules like that really captured a lot of that kind of down and dirty, gritty feel of that universe without having to go, well, what's the difference between an AC2 and an AC20 on reload speed and heat and all of that? I didn't have to go through some of those minutia, crunchy rules mechanics as a conversion might have, because I said, what does that universe feel like? And then just converted that over to Savage Worlds and said, oh, well, the combats are faster. There's nothing I want to do to make that go shorter, to make that go longer. I don't want 4-hour combats because I want to get to the part where the meat gets out of the mech and walks around and does something later on, because we're doing a role-playing game. So you have to be in service to what you're playing. If you want to play Battletech, play Battletech. Get out the big table, do a 4-hour fight. If you want to play a role-playing game in the Battletech universe, Savage Worlds works really, really well for that. I think that's all I'm willing to say on this for right now, because otherwise I'll take the rest of the night talking about just Battletech and my love for the system and the universe that's been created in the game that gets to come out in April.
All right, we going down the line?
Mm-hmm.
Because the next one is that I saw, let's see, where was it? Do the effects of powers last if the caster is knocked out, dead? Does it keep going? If you scroll down a little bit, Sunset Sam answers that question for us. So
yeah.
Well, a couple of things I do want to just really quickly throw in here is that. So the big thing with the powers is it doesn't depend on the power that's being cast.
No.
It depends on how it's being maintained. If it's still within the original duration of the power, I don't care what happens to the caster, it still happens. So if it had a 3-round effect and you kill the caster the very same round it was cast, it still goes on for 2 more rounds, because that's just the way that power works. But if it's a power that's being maintained, say, I know Jared put an example here in the private chat for the hosts of, I cast armor on myself and I'm maintaining that through the fight. If you even shake me, I have to make a smarts roll to maintain it. And if I fail that smarts roll, the power is dropped.
Yeah, and then if you take damage, you have to make an arcane skill roll, and the damage that was dealt to you is basically, you could call it your target number. Not to drop all of your spells, whatever you're maintaining.
Yeah, you make an imposed roll against it. And then I believe if you're playing the no power points rule, it's like -1 per additional power you're maintaining. So if you've got, 3 or 4 different powers you're maintaining, you're making those smarts rolls and opposed rolls at -3 or -4 to keep all those powers up. And a failure means everything's gone. You've lost concentration in it. Bam. Just goes out. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, I understand. But the simple question that you ask yourself as a GM when that moment comes up in your game is, were they maintaining it, or did it have an original duration that hasn't run out? And answer it based on that. Didn't somebody ask about, how to handle critical hits in a sci-fi setting?
Oh yeah, that was Tim. No, Tim. No, we don't have time for that. That's going to be
I'm running you through an entire sci-fi.
That's going to be that could be a one.
Yeah,
one
that's a whole show. But I will say is this: treat vehicle combat as if you were playing the gritty damage setting rule, which means every time a wound is taken, you're rolling on the chart to see what the critical hit is. Every wound is an auto roll on that chart, just straight off. There's also some, there's driving rolls that have to be 88 every time you get hit, stuff like that. Take that moment, if you know you've got a game coming up where there's going to be vehicular combat, take a moment and reread it, just familiarize yourself with it, because I think most of us don't use it often enough to be familiar enough to run a vehicle combat right off the cuff, with probably the exception of like myself, Chris, and Jib. Myself and Chris, because we're freaking pirate fanatics, and someone here may have released his own setting regarding that. And Jib, because he's been running a pirate game recently, and anytime you get two pirate ships blazing at each other with cannons, there's going to be some vehicle combat considerations that you need to take into effect.
Cool deal. So Deadlands and Rippers can absolutely be done. If any of you have played Good Intentions, you know that they effectively lifted the method, or Chris, help me out here. Am I right or wrong? But I think in Rippers, what they do is they impose reason, but in Good Intentions, they impose strain. But it can absolutely be done. They can work side by side, no problem. In fact, in a lot of ways, I feel almost like they're the same setting. If you played The Flood, you can read in the notes, they mention the Twilight Legion, and then they also say also the Rippers. Like, the Twilight Legion is effectively this umbrella that covers everybody.
To a certain extent, I think when you're looking at the different Savage Worlds products, you can find several products that can all live in the same world. Like, you could absolutely see the Weird Wars entire series also being set in the same world as Rippers, Solomon Kane, and Deadlands. Why? Because they all touch on slightly different time periods or different locations during the same time period. But they all have this whole, there's a dark horror, mysterious part of the world that is out there that people don't really talk about and accept, but it's truly there, and those horrors come to manifest based on it's the Weird West, or it's, you know, the monsters in Rippers, or the release of demons in Solomon Kane, or obviously the horrors of war bring out these other horrors. And so I think you can absolutely stitch some different things together fairly easily with Savage Worlds. I know Ed Wetterman had talked once about the fact that he's a staunch believer that ETU graduates go on to join Agents of Oblivion.
Right.
And it's kind of, you know, that's the career path, is they graduate from ETU and then they become an agent in Agents of Oblivion. So I think there's absolutely the ability to stitch a lot of different products together within Savage Worlds. I think the biggest reason we don't see it as far as like official canonical things is, one, a good number of these come out from different licensees, and two, from a PEG standpoint, it's a lot harder to manage stitching together all these settings into one world than it would be to say, here's the Deadlands setting and just let you run with it, and here's the Ripper setting, let you run with that. But you absolutely could merge the two with very little difficulty.
I actually, at one point, I ran a modern day version of Deadlands that was biker gangs. I was doing like part Sons of Anarchy in the Deadlands universe. And the more I kept running it, the more it just started gravitating towards ETU.
Yeah, I kind of wish I could get an ETU game that would last long enough to dovetail into Agents of Oblivion, but I've got such new shiny syndrome with crap that I'm lucky to finish. And my problem is both the two groups I run for, we only play every other week, so we only play twice a month. So it takes us a while, and we only play for 4 hours at a time.
Well, the other problem you have is the third group that I know you GM for ETU, it only meets at cons, so that's going to take forever to clear the entire.
Well, and they got held back a semester too because we couldn't run it this last con because Sarah Martinez, who's writing the games, well, she had life happen, a new baby, a toddler, all kinds of stuff come up, and so we put them on probation for a semester. So we're going to be a semester behind what we were thinking we were going to be.
So Jeffrey Gordon asks a really interesting question. He's about to GM apparently a 12-hour session, and something he does annually with friends, and he wants to know any advice for pacing and Benny refreshes. The first thing I will say is this: make sure you have several exciting moments, set up the little scenes, and even like mini scenes to as filler. To throw in there that's going to drain the bennies, and then I would do a Benny reset every 4 hours, but I wouldn't do it as a Benny reset. I would do it as a refresh. Take whatever you have and draw your initial on top of it, and just let them pile bennies up throughout the entirety of 12 hours, but keep putting them in situations where they're either going to need to spend the bennies or they're going to want to do something cool, which is going to also drain bennies back out of that.
Yeah, I kind of think he put in there a few more down. He says break it into 2 to 3 hour sessions, start each new session with the standard starting Benny. So yeah, I think he's right along what you want to do. Take a break every 2-3 hours, and yeah, I think that sounds great. And I really wish that I could play in one of those, because I remember the day when we used to role play for 12 hours at a time, and now we're lucky to get 4 hours in.
I'm just gonna throw this in there. Anything in our behind the scenes chat that's Jared is Jared answering the question through type so that he doesn't have to wear his voice out. We keep saying that somebody asked the question or answered the question. No, that's just Jared giving us what he wants us to mention about it.
Oh, there it is. No, I didn't even notice that.
I think a 12-hour session is an awesome thing, but you absolutely, plan your 4 hour breaks around meals or something of that nature, so that there's a nice little break in the action for a moment, and then just hand out when you come back from lunch, hand out fresh bennies to everybody. And
that's a good idea too.
Enough cinematic actiony stuff happening, enough truly open moments for the rule of cool to kick in, where people are going to want to spend those bennies. And you don't have to worry about the drain, because they will just naturally be throwing them on the table more often.
So speaking from a psychological standpoint, all right, if someone gets a reward every single time they do something, then it doesn't really register. Like, they don't take it for granted. If they try something and they never get a reward, then they eventually shut down. But if they get a reward interspersed, like say maybe somewhere in between 80 to 20% of the time, then they will continually develop that almost addiction to the habit. And I'm sorry, since I'm teaching you how to brainwash people, this is horrible. I'm a supervillain. You'll deal with it.
For someone who works in the behavioral health industry, I don't approve of you teaching people Pavlovian tricks.
All right. The point being, all GMs
ring that bell.
Are a little bit evil masterminds, because here's what I do for my rule of cool. If a player is willing to try something awesome and cinematic, interspersedly, there's a chance that I will give them a Benny for just trying it. And it's not an every time thing, but if it sounds cool enough, I'll be like, you know what? That sounds awesome. Take a Benny for coming up with that idea. So now that person and then everybody there, either consciously or unconsciously, starts figuring out what kind of cool thing they can start doing.
Yeah, okay, so I want to answer CL Taylor's question. It just says, hey, Chris, are there any one-sheets for Through Hell and High Water? There are going to be. Yes, we had 10 or 11 adventures written by a lot of really good authors. We are going through those right now. There's some tweaks that need to be done on them since the book has gone to print. We have some things we want some of them to add or tweak, and then we got to go through editing and formatting, but they will be out there. So I think it's 10 or 11 one-sheet adventures that will be coming out. They'll probably be up on RPG Now. All of the backers will get those. That's part of the digital rewards. So yeah, be on the lookout for those. It might take us a month or two to get those all done. We still have to get the book shipped out. We're doing the domestic shipping ourselves. which we're learning was maybe a mistake. But hey, live and learn. They'll be out at some point here soon. As Pinnacle likes to say, they'll be ready when they're ready.
So I'm going to throw one in here from Sunset Sam, just because I know it might actually tempt our hostess with the mostest to unmute his mic and show off his feminine growly voice at the moment. Sunset Sam asks, did you ever regret a tough rules call you made that killed a character or really screwed the direction of the campaign, and then realized after the session that you kind of messed up the call? So, Jared, you want to give us your carte blanche answer about you killing the character or you really screwing up as a GM?
I don't kill characters. Players' poor choices and bad dice rolls kill characters.
So let me expand on this. If I make a rules call at the table, typically I'm going to err on the side of the way the rules are written in the book. I try not to err away from the rules if I can help it at all. So I believe it was Dustin or Chris earlier had said that with the rules that currently exist, it's pretty easy to kind of fabricate an extension off of them based on the logic that's already there in the framework, because that's what Savage Worlds rules really are. Is there a framework around which you're that's the tent poles that hold your entire game up. So when someone does something that's a little off the beaten path, you can go, well, is that a trick? Is it a test of will? Is it a dramatic task? Is it a so can I handle it with a social conflict or mass battle? There's a lot of different ways to treat things. I know there was a conversation one time about what happens to a character when they fall off a horse, and should they take falling damage and whatnot. And there was like a 3-page long conversation about different GMs making different rule calls on it. And Richard Woolcock pointed out that there was actually a rule for it in one setting that conflicted with a rule for it in a different setting, because in these two different settings, falling off a horse had a different level of severity based on the theme and everything of the setting. So you're the best one to make that judgment call in the moment about your game. And so long as you stay consistent with whatever judgment call you made, it wasn't the wrong call. It might be a call that did indeed lead to negative ramifications on the game or on the player characters, but it wasn't the wrong call, because you're going to then stay consistent with that rule going forward. And the players now know the rules within your world act such, so they know to tailor their actions around that. If little Timmy's character fell down the damn well because he chose to walk across the beam that you said was cracked, and then you had him make a dice roll to see if he made an agility check at as the beam shattered under him, and he fell in the well because he missed his dice roll, that's not your fault as a GM. That's Timmy's fault for not listening when you said the beam was cracked in the first place. It's Timmy's fault for not making his agility check when you gave him that chance to grab on. I'm not saying describe the scene as a cracked beam, and then he says he walks across it. You say, okay, you fall to your death with no dice roll. There should always be a way out. There should always be a mechanical effect before you get to player death.
Yeah, geez, Tim, you need to pay attention. Start listening.
But at the same time, player choices need to have those consequences. Otherwise, you might as well take the whole game part of role-playing game and throw it out the window. Because if all you're going to do is worry about, did I make the right call? Did it end up positive for the players? You're now just working on storytelling, and you're not worried about the game. If you're going to have a game, have consistent rules and make rules calls that are consistent, and then you don't have to worry about it was the wrong call. It's never your fault that something happened because the rules say it did. It's just the way the game worked out.
Right. Okay, well, gents, on that, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down. So until next time, this is Jared, Savage Daddy Gunning for Dustin, Dave, and Chris, saying keep rolling and stay savage.